Welcome to Faith and Science. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Recently I was just over chatting with my neighbour next door, and when we noticed that one of his cows was about to give birth. So we went over to watch this and to see if there was any help needed. One of my neighbour's daughters was there. She's studying at uni in the area of medical science, but she didn't want to stay around and watch the birth. She started watching it but then stopped. But the birth of the calf took place. It was all over in a minute or so, and it reminded me though of some amazing biochemistry that occurs just at birth. And just recently I read a very interesting article by Eliana Calentine, who is a physician and has specialised in obstetrics. And I found this article on the changes that take place when a baby is born as absolutely amazing design features. Now, the evidence for design in nature is just overwhelming. You know, evolutionists claim that all the different structures that we have formed solely by chance. There were mutations, and the scenario is the fishes that happened to develop and have a mutation with stronger fins was able to drag itself from one pond to the next when the drought came, and hence survived, and it bred other fishes with these stronger muscles and so forth. And really, when you think about it, the change from a muscle to a leg system is a huge amount of code, all these different joints and muscles and bones and nerves and tendons and so forth. Blood vessels have to be created. And, to me it seems so obvious that it just can't arise by chance. But when we look at birth, what happens is we have a system set up, and there are a number of systems set up in the little baby that are temporary. So these are design systems that are set up that they're temporary, and the mechanisms are there to change over to a different system as soon as a baby is born. So when the baby is in its mother, it gets its life support from the placenta, which surrounds the baby. It's part of the womb. And the baby has its own kidney and lungs and a digestive system and an immune system. In fact, sometimes a baby, in actual fact, can, just before it's born, can do its first poo. Now, that is not very good when that happens, and will need that the baby's airways would need to be clean. But it just shows you that all those mechanisms are there. Now, the lungs, of course, with the little mini air sacs in there are compressed, and so they're there. They're compressed in its lung, and the baby is, of course, in its fluid, and so it's underwater. And in a sense it is breathing, but it's breathing through the blood supply that it is receiving, not through its lungs so much at that time, or not through its lungs at that time. And so it's this placenta that's providing the nutrients and the oxygen for the growing baby, and it also takes away the waste products. Now, the little placenta, of course, also forms a barrier against a lot of harmful products, and it protects the baby from exposure to a lot of chemicals and so forth, so that might be in the mother's blood, while allowing oxygen and carbon dioxide to cross. And it's as the little baby grows, and of course the baby can attach to different parts of the placenta, and so and that allows for when the baby is growing, it can be in different positions initially, and so different pregnancies can feel quite different. But as the blood leaves the placenta and it's carried via the umbilical cord, it goes mainly into the baby's liver, and then a small amount of blood is sent to nourish the liver, but the majority of the blood passes through a vessel abbreviated DV, and this is one of a main temporary bypass shunt that God has designed. And so this blood of the ductus venosus, or DV, flows into a large vein called the IVC, or inferior vena cava. And this is the vessel that brings the deoxygenated blood from the lower extremities to the heart. And the vein enters the right of one of the heart's two upper chambers, the right atrium, or RA. And there's another large vein that enters the RA as well, carrying the blood from the head and upper extremities. Now, some of the baby's blood is also shunted from the right atrium across to the other side, the left atrium, by way of a temporary opening called the foramen ovale, or abbreviated FO. And this is what's commonly called the hole in the wall dividing the upper chambers of the heart. And so we refer to this as the hole in the heart. And this is where, again, this is another temporary blood shunt that God has sent up while now the baby's body to develop and all the organs to function, and until it actually begins to breathe and change to its regular system. And so what happens is that as the baby is born, the changes take place, and pressure in the left side increases while the pressure on the right side decreases of the heart. And this changes in pressure between the two atria causes the flaps of muscle around that hole in the heart that served as a shunt between them to fold in so it functionally closes. And so this all happens just as the baby is born, and the obstetrician clamps the umbilical cord and changes that circulation. At the same time, then air enters the lungs, and it expands the sacs. So the little baby's mouth comes into air, opens, air comes into the lungs because they've been compressed. And so now as they expand from that compression coming out through birth, they expand, that draws air in, and breathing begins. And this all causes the blood flow to the lungs to increase. As I said, that change in blood flow in the lungs then changes the pressure difference across the heart, which closes that flap shunt. And the shunts of fetal circulation, the DV and the DA and the FO, all begin to shut down functionally with that first breath. As very quickly fibrous tissue grows in the first months, and the hole there seals over. These are just one of the amazing system of little biochemistry and also physical changes that take place during birth that are just switched on just at that precise time. Now, when you think about it, to have these temporary structures, they are so characteristic of a design feature. These temporary blood vessels, these temporary openings and passages and so forth that are there. Also the fact that the villi in the lung are compressed so that the baby doesn't try to breathe while it's underwater, in effect, in fluid. And yet the moment it comes out through to that squeezing and pressure, coming out as it expands, coming out it draws the air in, begins the process. And when we think about that process of birth, it is just so reeks of design features. The switch over when the umbilical cord is cut, the switch over from the mother's biochemistry to the baby's biochemistry. And, of course, mothers and babies can have different blood types, and there's so much difference that takes place at that particular time. The evidence for design, just maybe another interesting one I was reading, reasonably recently was about the octopus. And I've talked about the octopus before, particularly its ability to regenerate lost sort of limbs, such as its tentacles. If they're cut off or bitten off, they grow back exactly. They grow back to exactly the same length. They grow back the same. And this understanding the cascade of biochemistry behind this has huge potential in medicine. But one of the fascinating things about octopuses is that they, again, seem to be very intelligent. Just reading one of the stories of Inky, an octopus that achieved international notoriety in 2016 when he escaped from the New Zealand's National Aquarium. Tracks found the next morning, just reading a little report on this, found that showed Inky had forced himself through a small gap at the top of his enclosure and then travelled across the floor to a drain pipe and onto the sea. So that's pretty cool, eh? And another article on this says other institutions that have kept octopuses tell of similar great escapes and also of their overnight raids to catch and eat fish in other tanks. It goes on, one active octopus learned to turn off electric lights by using its siphon jet to squirt water at them, short-circuiting the power supply. Another took an apparent dislike to a certain attendant squirting a stream of salty water at her whenever she came within range. And even after the attendant was absent for months, the octopus, not having squirted at anyone else meanwhile, evidently recognised her and immediately resumed the squirting attacks. So there's some interesting sort of features there. Apparently they're quite hard to do research on. Researchers trying to test 3 octopuses with the classic pull lever for food type experiment, that they do with rats that you read about, were stymied when one of them tried to pull the light into the tank and squirted water at everyone who approached it, prematurely ended the experiment by breaking the lever. So some quite funny scientific stories there. Of course, one of the fascinating aspects of octopuses is the ability of them to match the background of their environment, like a coral reef, by changing colour so perfectly that it's very difficult to see them. And one researcher described their skin as being like a pixelated video screen. So the top layer contains thousands. The top layer of skin on the octopus contains thousands of tiny pockets of different colours that can be independently opened and closed so as to exhibit the colour scheme of the moment. And then underlying that particular surface of cells that display the colour is a layer of reflective cells stacked like a diffraction grating to create iridescence. And so that's what gives them that sort of, you can see at times a bright glow. And yet there's another layer beneath that bounces back incoming light. So one of the things that I find fascinating is that how can the octopus know how to change the colour of those cells to match its environment? And how does it control that? It's in its brain. And, of course, they can change their shape. Some octopuses can change their shape so they look like a banded sea snake or a lionfish. And also as they're swimming along, and there might be sort of like the shadows of clouds on the sandy bottom, they can actually mimic those shadows. The shadows are moving, they're moving, and yet their shadow that the octopus is making with its little skin colour cells matches the darkness of the shadow of the cloud. So I find this is quite fascinating. But just when you look at the structure of those cells and those different layers, we think of the skin, yes, you can draw that picture of octopus's skin. And, I actually caught an octopus once. I remember fishing in Lake Macquarie as a teenager and I was pulling in my line and I thought, I've snagged a big clump of seaweed. And as I pulled it up, it was quite a large octopus. I guess the body of it was about the size of a soccer ball, football, and its tentacles would have been, 2/3 of a metre long each. And what happened, of course, was it grabbed the side of the boat. Didn't want to come any further. And so I just had to cut my line, which was probably a good thing. We didn't really want to pull it into the boat. We didn't know what to do with it. But, when we think about the design of just those cells, we've got to remember that there's a code. The DNA code has to arise by chance to not only build the proteins that build the structure of those cells, but also to build and encode for the enzymes that produce the particular chemicals that produce the particular pigments. And then it has to encode for those layers of cells that are structured like a diffraction grating. And for listeners who don't know what diffraction grating is, a diffraction grating in physics and science is where you have very, very close lines or grooves together on a little lens, and as a result, the light bends as it goes past those little grooves. It bends, and we call that diffraction. And so it can be used to separate the different colours or different wavelengths of light. And so again, to formulate the cells to build those little structures requires, again, intense design and programming. Those cells have to be in the right place to be able to diffract the light, to diffract those colours. And remember, they have to have the reflective cells behind them. There's, even just in that cell structure in the octopus, there's so much design there. The other thing, of course, is the suckers, and that was the suckers of the octopus are very, very strong. I mean, I experienced that when that octopus grabbed the side of the boat. And one of the amazing things is that they've looked at octopus suckers and they've attracted quite a bit of attention by scientists that studying, biomedics, because their suckers can suck more strongly than any normal man-made suckers can. And scientists looked at this and found that they had special radial grooves in these sucker areas, and that increased the area subject to pressure reduction during attachment. And so they began designing suckers with these groove patterns based on the octopus groove patterns. And so here again, we have evidence of amazing design, yet if you believe the theory of evolution, you've got to believe that this arose by chance mutations, over time. But really the whole coordinated system is to make those grooves at that time, you've got to change the code. And the code doesn't know what the environment is. You've got to have a mutation, a random chemical type mutation that doesn't understand the need to have a stronger sucker. Change the code. this is why the whole theory of evolution doesn't work, and it really arouses my ire, I suppose, when I read it. So I mentioned in one of the previous episodes where we have these scientists like Sir David Attenborough and Richard Dawkins and others calling out saying, we want to make sure there's no creationism taught in schools. It mustn't be taught as science. But evolution fails in so many different areas. Matter of fact, it's quite interesting here that there's the octopus fossils go back to about 100 million years, something like that. But yet the evolutionary chain, background, the evolutionary tree for an octopus just isn't there. The octopuses just appear in the fossil record. They're fully formed, of course. And what are their ancestors? They're, matter of fact, in a 2018 paper that was published on the octopus, 33 evolutionary scientists even seriously argued that octopus biology would have needed an input of genes from listen to this, an extraterrestrial source. So they're saying that there's just no phylogenetic tree when we look at its DNA and this sort of thing. Where did all these genes come from? And if you're interested in that paper, by the way, the author is E. Steele, Steele, and 32 others. And the title of the paper is Cause of Cambrian Explosion, Terrestrial or Cosmic. And it was published in Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology, volume 136, pages 3 to 23 in 2018. So I'll just give you that reference again. Really interesting paper, quite a large paper. The first author is E. Steele, Steele, Causes of Cambrian Explosion, Terrestrial or Cosmic, and it was published in Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology, volume 136, pages 3 to 23 in 2018. Now, those scientists wrote that such things as a sophisticated nervous system, intelligent complexity in the 8 prehensile arms, camera-like eyes similar to ours, instantaneous camouflage via the ability to change colour and body shape. There was just so much detail and complexity to the octopus. That's why they're saying, well, somehow genes must have come here from outer space. And this should give us an idea of how shallow the theory of evolution is. It can't really explain the origin of these animals. So if the so-called evolutionary progression from primitive nautilus to cuttlefish to squid and octopus that needs massive changes in the genes, and there's just no evolutionary change for that. But what does this point to? It points to intelligent design. It points to supernatural design. It points so clearly to a creator. The octopus really is amazing evidence for creation. Interesting too how octopuses use their limbs, because they've got 8 legs or arms, and one study found that while all the limbs basically have the same capabilities, the octopus tends to favour particular limbs for certain functions. For example, when eating, the third limb is most often used. When swimming, all tentacles are generally employed. When crawling around, the front 2 tentacles are most active for exploratory work, and the limbs immediately behind them used for further. And they also, the 2 rearmost, provide most of the propulsion of movement, walking or pushing off the seabed. And so they quipped that essentially they said, well, you could think of an octopus having effectively 6 arms and 2 legs. But that was some research that was reported on octopuses on the abc.net.au Australia on the 14th of August, some years ago. And there was also an article by D. Thomas called "Octopuses Have 2 Legs and 6 Arms," if you Google that. So it's quite interesting, of course, that we find fossils. When an octopus dies, if not gobbled up by scavengers, its soft body's going to decay pretty quickly into a slimy blob. But it's been pointed out that, some people have claimed, it's very unlikely to find a fossil octopus, but fossils have been found with very astonishing degree of preservation. They're displaying all their fossilised arms, muscles, suckers, internal gills, even ink. And matter of fact, I've seen an article where an artist has drawn a picture of the octopus using ink from the fossil. So there was soft tissue preserved. And of course, this is powerful evidence that must have been buried very rapidly. Powerful evidence for the flood. There is just so much evidence for intelligent design. The birth of a baby, the changes that take place at birth, it's just amazing evidence of intelligent design and temporary systems that are set up that change at birth, the mechanisms to change them. There's just so much evidence that we are created. We're not a product of random mutations. And that creator is our Lord Jesus Christ. The Bible explains that. And he is our Saviour. And there is a future for us too, a future of eternal life. This journey on our planet Earth is just a temporary one. You've been listening to Faith and Science, and remember, you can listen to this program by Googling 3ABN Australia, or one word, .org.au. Click on the listen button and this program will come up. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Have a great day.
You've been listening to a production of 3ABN Australia Radio.